Ever get that feeling like this life is a bit off? Like a video game
Yeah.
with amazing graphics, but a kind of wonky storyline?
Hmm.
That's kind of the vibe we're going for in this deep dive.
Okay.
We're looking at this thought-provoking piece that explores the idea of reality as a boot camp for eternity.
Interesting.
But here's the thing. It uses biblical passages to support this idea.
Okay.
Almost like Earth is a test run before the main event.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I see where you're going with this. It's a concept that many philosophers and theologians have grappled with for centuries.
Right.
The text we're looking at today uses this powerful analogy of Earth being like a shadow and heaven being the substance.
Hold on. Shadow of what exactly?
Well, the text uses a passage from Hebrews 10.1, which compares our earthly experiences to a fleeting reflection of a much greater reality.
Okay, so think of it this way. Imagine a hyper-advanced simulation that feels incredibly real,
Yeah,
but it's actually just a training ground for something way more profound and lasting.
you're right.
That's the gist of what we're diving into.
Exactly. It's like we're playing the beta version right now.
Uh-huh, yeah.
With heaven being the fully realized, glorious final release.
So if this is a boot camp, as the text calls it,
Mhm.
what are we being tested on? What's the ultimate objective?
That's where it gets really interesting. The source material that we're looking at emphasizes that it's not about racking up knowledge points or completing religious rituals perfectly.
Okay.
It's all about genuine love. Specifically, love directed towards God.
Love. That seems almost too simple.
It might sound simple,
Yeah.
but it's deceptively complex. The text uses the example of Satan, who had immense knowledge and power, but chose pride and self-rule over surrendering to God's love.
So it's not just about intellectually knowing about God.
Right.
It's about a deep, heartfelt alignment with him. A complete change in allegiance, almost like switching sides in this cosmic game.
You're getting it.
Yeah.
And that brings us to this concept of being born again,
Love
which
it.
is a central idea in the source material.
Yeah, the text mentions that a lot. But this born-again idea, it sounds less like a religious buzzword and more like a complete rewiring of our internal operating system.
That's a great way to put it. The text describes this transformation as a radical shift in our core being. It's like trading our old limited programming for a new set of instructions that are aligned with the source code of heaven.
So how does this rewiring actually happen? What's the mechanism?
The text attributes this transformation to the Holy Spirit. Think of it like a divine hack that replaces our default settings with a yearning for holiness and a desire to connect with God on a much deeper level. It's about surrendering our ego and embracing a new way of being.
It almost sounds like we're upgrading from a corrupted file to the full authentic version of ourselves.
That's a really compelling way to think about it. And it's this transformation, this alignment with the substance of heaven that the text suggests is the key to navigating this boot camp successfully.
This is where things get a little tricky for me. If we're being tested, why is this simulation filled with so much suffering? It seems like a pretty rough training ground.
That's a question that has perplexed people for millennia,
Right.
but the text offers a unique perspective. It suggests that pain, while difficult to endure,
Yeah.
serves a specific purpose in this boot camp.
What kind of purpose could pain possibly serve?
Well, the text argues that hardship reveals our true idols. The things we cling to for comfort and security, things like money, fame, or even just a sense of control.
Okay.
And when those things inevitably fail to deliver,
Yeah.
it creates a space for us to seek something more lasting.
You're saying that disappointment, even suffering,
Yeah.
can push us towards something bigger than ourselves. Almost like it exposes the glitches in this simulated reality and makes us crave the real deal.
Exactly. By stripping away our illusions of self-sufficiency,
Right.
pain can force us to confront our deepest needs and longings,
Okay.
pushing us towards a fulfillment that can only be found in a deeper connection with God.
That makes me think about the part of the text where it talks about trading your resume for a funeral. What does that even mean?
That's a powerful image, isn't it? It's talking about the need to let go of our ego, our
Okay.
self-reliance,
Yeah.
all the things we use to define ourselves in this temporary world.
So it's like we have to die to our old selves,
Yes.
our old operating system, in order to be reborn into this new reality.
Precisely. And that metaphorical death is often a painful process, but the text suggests that it's absolutely essential for true transformation.
It's like hitting the reset button, allowing the game to reconfigure itself with the proper settings. But how do we actually do that? What's the strategy for dying to ourselves?
The source material outlines 3 key steps. First, we need to admit that we're stuck. that our current approach isn't working.
Like realizing we've been playing on the wrong difficulty setting this whole time, and we need a serious upgrade.
That's a great analogy. The second step is where it gets really challenging. We have to actively trade our resume for a funeral. It means letting go of our ego, our self-reliance, all the things we cling to for a sense of identity and security.
So it's about surrendering control, admitting that we need something bigger than ourselves to guide us through this boot camp.
Exactly. And that brings us to the third step, embracing the power of the Holy Spirit. It's not about emotional hype or empty rituals,
Okay.
but a genuine invitation for God's transforming power to work within us.
This is where the text starts to sound pretty radical.
Yeah.
It's not just about trying to be good. It's about surrendering to a force that can fundamentally change who we are at the deepest level.
Yeah.
It's like we're allowing the source code of heaven to rewrite our internal programming.
That's a great way to connect it back to the simulation analogy. It's not about earning our way into heaven through our own efforts,
Right.
but about allowing ourselves to be transformed by a power that's already available to us.
It's just less about achievement and more about receptivity, less about striving and more about surrendering.
Exactly. And as we surrender to this transforming power, we begin to see the world and ourselves through a completely different lens. We start to glimpse the substance behind the shadow, the true reality that lies beyond our limited perception.
It's like there's this whole other dimension operating alongside ours, a spiritual reality that's influencing everything. And that's where this idea of Satan's counterfeit kingdom comes in, right?
You're right on track. That's what we'll explore next. The text delves into the biblical concept of Satan's counterfeit kingdom, a reality that attempts to mimic heaven but ultimately leads to emptiness and despair.
Okay, so we're finally getting to the part where things might get a little spooky.
Yeah.
This is where it feels like the lines between reality and simulation start to blur even more.
That's a great observation. The text suggests that this shadow world we experience is not only a reflection of greater reality,
Right.
but it's also being influenced by a counterfeit reality, a distorted version of the truth.
So it's like we're navigating a virtual reality game that's been hacked by a malicious program.
That's a great way to visualize it. We'll unpack this idea of Satan's counterfeit kingdom and how it relates to the concept of Earth as a simulation in the next part of our deep dive. A bit of a mind bender, but stay tuned. It gets really interesting.
Okay, so last time we were talking about this whole idea of Earth being like a simulation, a boot camp for eternity. And we were just getting to the part about Satan's counterfeit kingdom. I have to admit, that's the part that makes me feel like I'm about to fall down a rabbit hole.
It's definitely a mind-bending concept, but the text presents it in a way that's both fascinating and surprisingly relevant to our everyday lives.
So how does this counterfeit kingdom actually work? Is it like a separate dimension or something?
The source material that we're working with doesn't really get into the specifics of how it operates, but it does offer some interesting insights. It suggests that Satan's kingdom mimics heaven, offering temporary pleasures and fleeting satisfactions that ultimately leave us empty and searching for something more.
So it's like those knockoff versions of popular apps you find in shady app stores. They look kind of like the real thing, but they're full of bugs and glitches, and they never quite work the way they're supposed to.
That's a great analogy. The text portrays Satan's kingdom as a distorted reflection of true reality, a pale imitation of the beauty, joy, and fulfillment that can only be found in God's kingdom.
Okay, so let's try to map this onto the simulation idea. If heaven is the source code, the true reality that this boot camp is preparing us for, then Satan's kingdom is like, what? A corrupted file, a virus trying to mess up the game.
I like where you're going with that. The text seems to imply that Earth as a fallen realm under Satan's influence becomes a battleground between these two realities. It's like we're caught in the crossfire of a cosmic conflict, constantly bombarded with temptations and distractions that try to pull us away from the source code of heaven.
This is making me think about all those times I've gotten sucked into the drama of social media, or stressed out about things that don't really matter in the grand scheme of things. It's like I've been tricked into playing on the wrong server, one that's full of glitches and frustrations.
That's exactly the kind of trap the text warns us about. It describes Satan's kingdom as a realm of fleeting pleasures, empty promises, and ultimately, deep disappointment. It's like chasing after a mirage in the desert, constantly seeking satisfaction, but never truly finding it.
Okay, but if Satan's kingdom is so flawed and temporary, why are so many people drawn to it?
That's the tricky part. The text emphasizes that Satan is a master of deception, packaging his temptations in a way that appeals to our deepest desires and longings. It's like those targeted ads that seem to know exactly what you're thinking and offer you exactly what you think you need.
So it's about recognizing those deceptive patterns, those glitching desires. They're actually leading us further and further away from the real deal.
Precisely. The text encourages us to be discerning, to question our motivations, and to evaluate whether the things we're chasing after are truly aligned with the source code of heaven.
So how do we even begin to distinguish between the real and the counterfeit? How do we know if we're on the right track in this boot camp?
The source material points to some key indicators. One is the concept of lasting joy versus fleeting pleasure. The things that Satan's kingdom offers might feel good in the moment,
Yeah.
but they ultimately leave us empty and craving more.
It's that sugar rush feeling you get from mindless entertainment or indulging in unhealthy habits. It feels good temporarily, but it never truly satisfies.
That's a great way to put it. The text contrasts those fleeting pleasures with the deep, abiding joy that comes from aligning ourselves with God's kingdom. It's a joy that's not dependent on external circumstances, a peace that transcends the ups and downs of this simulated reality.
Okay, so lasting joy is one sign. What are some other ways to tell if we're being influenced by the counterfeit versus the real?
Another key indicator is the source of our motivation. Are we driven by fear, competition, and a desire to prove ourselves? Or are we motivated by love, compassion, and a desire to serve something greater than ourselves?
It's like choosing between playing the game out of a sense of scarcity and lack, or playing it from a place of abundance and generosity. One path leads to isolation and frustration, while the other leads to connection and fulfillment.
Exactly. The text suggests that true freedom and lasting satisfaction are found in aligning our hearts with God's love and allowing that love to flow through us into the world.
That brings us back to the whole idea of being born again. It's not just about changing our beliefs, but about transforming our deepest motivations, rewiring our internal operating system to be driven by love rather than fear.
That's a powerful way to put it. It's like upgrading from a self-centered operating system to a love-centered one. And it's this shift in motivation that allows us to navigate the challenges of this boot camp with a sense of purpose and resilience.
So it's less about trying to avoid pain and hardship and more about facing those challenges with a different set of tools that are rooted in love and connection rather than fear and isolation.
That's a great insight. The text emphasizes that we're not meant to go through this boot camp alone. We're designed for connection, for community, for mutual support and encouragement.
This is making me think about the part of the text where it talks about trading your resume for a funeral. It seems to be saying that letting go of our ego,
Yes.
our need to prove ourselves, is essential for connecting with others in a more authentic way.
You're absolutely right. When we're consumed with building up our own resume, we tend to see others as competition,
Yeah.
as obstacles in our path to success. But when we die to that ego-driven mindset, we can start to see others as fellow travelers on this journey, people who are also navigating the challenges and complexities of this simulated reality.
So it's about shifting our focus from competition to collaboration, from isolation to connection. It's like switching from a single-player game to a multiplayer one, where we can pool our resources, support each other, and celebrate each other's victories.
That's a fantastic way to connect it to the gaming analogy. And the text suggests that it's in these genuine connections, these authentic relationships, that we catch glimpses of the substance of heaven, that we experience the true joy and fulfillment that this boot camp is designed to prepare us for.
Okay, this is all starting to make a lot more sense, but I still have one nagging question. The source material is full of biblical references and language. How does that fit into all this talk about simulations in video games?
That's a great question. The text uses the language of faith because it's rooted in a particular worldview, a belief system that sees the Bible as a source of truth and guidance. But even if you don't subscribe to that same belief system, the underlying concepts and principles can still be incredibly relevant and thought-provoking.
So it's not about taking everything literally, but about extracting the deeper meaning and applying it to our own lives, regardless of our personal beliefs.
That's a great way to approach it. The text uses the analogy of a boot camp and a simulated reality to help us understand the challenges and opportunities we face in this life. It's a framework for thinking about our purpose, our motivations, and our ultimate destination.
It's like a choose-your-own-adventure story where we get to decide how we want to play the game. We can get caught up in the glitches and frustrations of the counterfeit kingdom, or we can seek out the source code of heaven and align ourselves with a reality that's more joyful, more connected, and more fulfilling.
That's a powerful way to put it. And it's a choice we make every day in every interaction and every decision.
So it's not about passively waiting for some far-off future reward, but about actively shaping our experience in the here and now, making choices that align us with the substance rather than the shadow.
Exactly. And the more we make those choices, the more we train our minds and hearts to recognize the difference between the counterfeit and the real, the temporary and the eternal. It's like developing a spiritual muscle that allows us to navigate this boot camp with increasing clarity, purpose, and resilience.
Okay, I'm starting to feel like I'm getting a handle on all this.
Hmm.
We've talked about the idea of Earth as a simulation, the concept of Satan's counterfeit kingdom, and the importance of aligning ourselves with the source code of heaven. But I'm curious to dive deeper into the specific scriptural evidence that the text provides. Can we unpack some of those key verses and see how they connect to this whole simulation analogy?
Absolutely. That's a great transition to the next part of our deep dive. The text uses several passages from the Bible to support its argument, and exploring those verses will give us even more insights into this fascinating concept of reality as a boot camp for eternity.
All right, so we've been on this deep dive exploring this whole idea of reality as a boot camp for eternity,
Right.
using that simulation analogy to kind of unpack some pretty dense concepts.
Yeah.
And last time we left off talking about how the text uses actual biblical passages to back up its arguments.
Right. It's really helpful to look at those specific verses because they offer some powerful insights into how this whole simulation thing might actually work.
Okay, so let's open up the digital Bible. See what kind of code we can crack. Which passages stand out to you as particularly relevant to this idea of Earth as a training ground for something bigger?
Well, one verse that really jumps out at me is 2 Corinthians 4.18,
Yeah.
which says, "The things seen are temporary, the unseen are eternal."
It makes me think about how we get so caught up in the graphics of the game,
Right.
like the material stuff that we can see and touch, that we forget about the underlying code, the deeper reality that's driving everything.
That's a great connection. The verse seems to be saying that what we experience with our senses is just a fleeting glimpse of a much more substantial and enduring reality.
Yeah, it's like we're so focused on playing the game on the lowest graphics setting that we're missing out on the full high-definition experience.
Exactly. And this verse reminds us that our true focus should be on cultivating those unseen qualities like love, compassion, character, because those are the things that will carry over into the eternal realm.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What other verses support this idea of a deeper reality beyond what we can immediately perceive?
Another passage that's really relevant is John 12.31. It talks about Jesus calling Satan the prince of this world.
Okay.
But then it goes on to say that Satan's reign is coming to an end.
That's a pretty intense image. So if Satan is like the hacker who's just been messing with the system, it sounds like his days are numbered.
That's the message that this verse seems to be conveying. Yeah. It suggests that the current state of affairs with all its glitches and frustrations is not the final word. There's a greater reality, a higher power that's ultimately in control.
It's like knowing that a new update is coming soon that'll fix all the bugs and introduce amazing new features. Gives you hope that things are going to get better.
Exactly. And this verse points to the hope and assurance that we find in aligning ourselves with God's kingdom, which is described as an unshakable, eternal reality.
So we got one verse emphasizing the temporary nature of this world,
Yeah.
and another one hinting at a coming shift in power. Any other passages we should look at?
One more verse that I think is really relevant to this conversation is Philippians 3.20, which says, "But our citizenship is in heaven, and we eagerly await a Savior from there, the Lord Jesus Christ."
So it's like this verse is reminding us that we're playing this game on an away server. Our true home, our ultimate allegiance is somewhere else entirely.
That's a brilliant way to put it. This verse reinforces the idea that our time on earth is a temporary assignment, a journey towards a much grander destination.
It's like we're here on a mission, but we're not meant to get too comfortable or attached to this temporary reality. Our true citizenship, our ultimate loyalty lies elsewhere.
Exactly. And this verse encourages us to live with that eternal perspective in mind, to make choices that reflect our true allegiance and prepare us for our ultimate homecoming.
You know, this whole conversation has really made me rethink how I view the world, my purpose, even my everyday choices. If this life is a boot camp for eternity, it suddenly makes everything feel a lot more significant.
Yeah, it's definitely a perspective-shifting idea. It challenges us to think beyond the immediate, the material, the temporary, and to consider the eternal implications of our actions.
It's like suddenly realizing that our choices in this game have real-world consequences, that we're not just playing for points, but for something far more profound and lasting.
That's a powerful way to put it. And it makes me think about that line from the text where it says, "What if every decision, every hardship, every act of love is shaping our eternity? It might change how we approach this simulation we call life."
That's a pretty mind-blowing thought. Makes you realize that we're not just passive players in this game. We have the power to shape the narrative, to influence the outcome, to choose our destiny.
Exactly. It's a call to live with intention, to make choices that align with our deepest values, and to embrace the opportunities for growth and transformation that this boot camp provides.
This deep dive has given me so much to think about. I feel like I've been given a new set of lenses through which to view the world, a new understanding of my place in the grand scheme of things.
And that's ultimately what we hope to achieve with these explorations, to spark curiosity, to encourage deeper reflection, and to empower our listeners to live more meaningful and purpose-filled lives.
So to wrap things up, what would you say is the key takeaway from all this? What's the most important thing for our listeners to remember as they go back out into the simulation?
I think the biggest takeaway is that this life, however challenging or confusing it may seem, is not the end of the story. It's a preparation, a training ground, a journey towards something far greater and more fulfilling than we can possibly imagine.
It's about choosing to play the game with an eternal perspective, making decisions that align with our true values and prepare us for the ultimate upgrade.
Beautifully said. And as we navigate the challenges and opportunities of this boot camp, let's remember that we're not alone. We have each other, we have a higher power guiding us, and we have the promise of a future that's filled with hope, joy, and a love that transcends all boundaries.
That's a perfect note to end on. Thanks for taking this deep dive with me.
It's been a pleasure exploring these ideas with you.
And to our listeners, keep seeking the substance behind the shadows. You might be surprised by what you find.